Hello everyone and welcome to Who Wore It Better, the weekly segment in which I review Raw and Smackdown back to back and try and figure out which show won for the week. Both these shows made me sleepy this week. I want to go to bed. Let's get this over with. Let's talk briefly about one of the few things on Raw that I was entertained by, the opening bit with Chris Jericho, Miz and Maurice, Dean Ambrose, the constant changing of the show. First it was the highlight reel, then it was Miz TV, then it was the Ambrose Asylum, and each time like they had the crew come in and change the set pieces and roll up the carpet and roll out new carpet and put new signs in, and they all had to work around the crews they were doing it. I thought that was kind of a funny thing to see happening kind of live, because usually you see that stuff happen like when the cameras are off. The live crowd sees it, but the TV audience doesn't when those set changes happen. And to have them all kind of happen at once, I thought was kind of a nice little merging, kind of reconciling of the fact that you have all these three people with their respective talk shows happening. Difficult to build the Jericho Owens thing, and you'll see this again on SmackDown when both guys are on separate brands. So in my opinion, Chris just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb when the meat of this segment really rests on Ambrose and Miz, which, like I said before last week, we've seen this before on SmackDown. Why are we seeing it again on Raw? Something that I saw was being brought up in the dirt sheets and online surrounding Miz and Ambrose is that Miz is referring to Ambrose in promos as like lazy and complacent, and apparently that is kind of a verbiage that's being sent to him, fed to him from the writers and everything, because they actually do feel that Ambrose is becoming complacent. He's kind of like falling back the most among the former Shield members, and I did kind of allude to that a little bit in my WrestleMania review. But in defense of Ambrose, when you work as hard as he did, especially in the last couple of years, and there's really nothing to show for it, then yeah, I can't blame him for being complacent. Matt Hardy in singles action this week, taking on Sheamus, kind of a follow-up from last week when it was Jeff Hardy and Cesaro. Not much to say about the match itself. I did think there was weird that Matt Hardy got Sheamus in a bulldog out of the corner. It looked like Sheamus kind of countered it almost, but he took the bigger sell. I don't know if it was just a little botched landing or what it was. The match ends when Jeff and Cesaro are having like a scuffle outside the ring. Sheamus is distracted. Matt hits the twist of fate and wins the match. We're seeing that kind of finish a lot, I feel, especially on Raw, where it's like, oh, there's a distraction outside between multiple parties, and then there's a distraction in the ring, and that's what causes the finish. I feel like I'm saying that sequence of events a lot over the last few weeks, and I don't know if it's just me that's noticing that. Anyway, I do like the thing at the end where this is like this tense moment at the end, and like whatever sportsmanship the two teams have been having over the last couple weeks really feels like it's eroding here, and it's going to come to a head at Payback. Someone I feel is going to turn heel after Payback. I don't know what's going to happen, but every time you see Sheamus and Cesaro, they keep losing to the Hardy Boys in singles action, and they're losing their temper, they're losing their composure, but at the very end they do shake hands still. So something's going to happen here, I feel like. There's a reason for this erosion of sportsmanship. The first dumpster match on WWE TV in 17 years, they said, as Braun Strowman takes on Kalisto, both between ambulances, collapsing rings, and dumpsters. Braun Strowman is the king of the gimmick right now. I liked Kalisto's new look, kind of a great Muta-inspired thing, also kind of looked a bit like Drago/Relic, what have you. I think everyone kind of expected this to be like a big squash with Kalisto getting some hope spots in, and for a little bit we did get some of that. I did love the spot where Braun caught Kalisto in midair, had him in a suplex position, and just tossed him, and Kalisto just took a face plant on the mat. That was such a sick bump. I loved it. But the finish had Braun Strowman on the apron on the outside, in front of the dumpster. Kalisto drop kicks him in the knees, and Braun lands in the dumpster. Now, I thought it was going to be you have to close the lid in order for it to count, but no, apparently Braun, by just landing in the dumpster, he lost the match, which on one hand was like, oh, this is kind of like a neat surprise, Kalisto winning, but at the same time, I think it was really poorly timed. I think that now is not the time to have Braun Strowman lose at all, or made to look weak at all. I think if you're going to have him against Roman Reigns, and I still believe Roman will probably win in the end. I'd be surprised if he didn't at this point at Payback. So you have Braun on this killing spree. He's flipping ambulances. He's making the ring break, and he's tossing Kalisto around like a piece of paper, and Kalisto beats him. Kalisto, who has lost a lot leading up to this point, and he beats Braun Strowman on a fluke, which in any other circumstance, I think you could, it would mean more if Kalisto had won more up to this point. But he's just been kind of a jobber. He was a jobber on SmackDown a lot before moving to Raw, and so now you have this thing. So on the one hand, if they're building to something more with Kalisto, then I guess that's okay. But after what happened when Braun beat him up some more, put him in the dumpster, locked it, and shoved him off the dreaded 4-foot stage, didn't have quite the same oomph as the New Age Outlaws tossing Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie off of the much taller stage several years ago, back in '98. But it was, it just seems so out of place. I think, again, if this was a couple of weeks after Payback, then I'd be more open to this if Kalisto had some more wins under his belt, but it seems weird to me. My biggest concern with this, like, okay, Kalisto wins and gets the fluke victory. Like, in the short term, great for him, but I mean, what's this going to lead to? Is this going to lead to a Kalisto push, considering he got destroyed by Strowman afterward? I kind of doubt it, but yeah, I mean, it's just, what's going to lead? I think this loss hurts Strowman more than it helps Kalisto. And that, I think, is the biggest issue here. We have a guy like Strowman who needs to look as strong as humanly possible and has looked very strong. And for him to lose, it just left a bad taste in my mouth. Dana Brooke taking on Alicia Fox in singles action. Dana Brooke's finisher looked like dog shit. Enzo, Cass, and Seth Rollins taking on Samoa Joe, Anderson, and Gallows in six-man tag team action. Actually, Enzo was taken out of the match beforehand by Anderson and Gallows in a pre-match beatdown. Finn Balor replaced him in this contest. I believe Finn Balor's kind of in this protected mode where it's like, since he was concussed 2 weeks ago by Jinder Mahal, he's been like cleared to compete, but clearly they've been kind of like booking around his potential injury here, but not having him do a whole lot, because last week when he fought Kurt Hawkins, he took like no punishment and took no bumps and just did all the offense on Hawkins. This one he took like 1 or 2 bumps overall, but for the most part he did like no real like flat back bump selling. He took a lot of, like, he took a knee and he got, he got beat up a little bit. The good guys win when Seth Rollins hits what I believe is his new finisher. He hits Anderson with like a short arm knee strike. He started using it last week. Apparently it was on a dark match and someone got video of it, and so now it's believed to be his new finisher. I think it's a nice way to break away from the pedigree and the connotation he had there in his, his feud with Triple H. It's no curb stomp, but I think it'll grow on me. Alexa Bliss taking on Sasha Banks. Alexa comes out before the match to cut a little promo on Bayley. Bayley comes out with a bit of a rebuttal. Doesn't get to say much before Alexa totally railroads her, and then before Bayley can say much in response, Sasha Banks comes out, and then Bayley, the women's champion, the one who's defending her title at Payback, gets just kind of shoved off to the background as Sasha and Alexa have their verbal sparring match. They have a match after the commercial break. It doesn't really go anywhere because Alexa powders out, gets out of the way of the bank statement, powders out, gets a count out loss. Bayley chases Alexa out, then Bayley turns around and Alexa just comes right back and decks Bayley. Bayley was on commentary the whole time here, and again, didn't get a whole lot of words in there either, didn't look very good there. And, then Alexa runs off, and then Bayley's just kind of like laying in a heap on the floor. It's like the complete destruction of whatever appeal Bayley had is kind of complete in my opinion. Main event time stemming from the opening segment as Chris Jericho and Dean Ambrose take on The Miz, and a partner was choosing in tag team action, but throughout the whole night Miz could not find a partner. He tried asking Cesaro and Sheamus, Heath Slater, Curtis Axel, not a partner to be found, and then it was really weird because he got this note, it's going to be here's my partner, here he comes out. Then no one showed up, and so then he was kind of left high and dry for a bit. It's weird to see like a 2-on-1 situation when the heel is at a disadvantage. Very weird to see here. So the faces are beating up on The Miz for a while. Ambrose is teasing a table spot with The Miz. Then Bray Wyatt teleports in and replaces The Miz. He beats up the faces for a while. Is he Miz's tag team partner, or was this kind of a matter of coincidence that he finds his way in? Because Miz never alluded to who his partner was going to be, and so the Bray Wyatt coming in, it just seems kind of forced. It seems kind of random. Like Bray Wyatt wouldn't alert The Miz via, telegram or email, or the hell The Miz had in his hand. So I find it kind of weird that he would be the partner all along, the intended partner in like kayfabe mode. So Bray Wyatt, who's busy, he cut a promo earlier in the night to Randy Orton, but he just teleports here. He literally just teleports into this main event with no rhyme or reason. And he beats up the faces, and then The Miz kind of celebrates with him, and Bray beats up The Miz, and that's how the show ends. And really confusing. And again, I've been saying this, I said this earlier, said last week, I'm going to say it again, really hard to build like your main event matches for Payback when your opponents are on different brands. SmackDown begins with the artist known as Shinsuke Nakamura coming out for an interview segment with Renee Young. He doesn't even get a word in before his new rival on SmackDown, Dolph Ziggler, comes out to interrupt him. He kicks Renee Young out of the ring and basically conducts his own little interview where he just kind of embarrasses Shinsuke a little bit. He basically insinuates that Shinsuke is Michael Jackson, which is kind of a weird comparison. I get what he's kind of going for, but the whole thing fell flat, but I will admit I did get a chuckle the way Dolph was explaining. It was like, you grew up an underprivileged child in Gary, Indiana with your brothers and sisters. Kind of reminded me of the line, I was born a poor black child. Just kind of like, that's what it reminded me of a little bit. So I got a little chuckle out of that. Then Shinsuke steals the mic and turns the tables on Dolph a bit. Dolph jumps him and they tease the Kinshasa. Dolph runs out. One of these days, these two are finally going to have a damn match. I don't want to have them do really awkward, stilted talking segments in the next several weeks leading up to Backlash. AJ Styles taking on Baron Corbin. Last week's main event was this week's opening match, right on down to Kevin Owens, the US champion, sitting at the commentary desk. The match was alright. It was very similar to last week's main event with a slightly different finish. Kevin Owens comes up and distracts Styles, who's on the apron. He gets kicked to the head. Styles misses the phenomenal forearm, but he does roll up Baron Corbin after a powerbomb attempt to win the match, but he's immediately jumped by Kevin Owens. Then Sami Zayn comes out. He makes a save. He kicks. He gives the haluva kick to Baron Corbin, but he then gets jumped by Kevin Owens. So Kevin Owens is standing tall the whole end of it. Good luck for Kevin Owens. Baron Corbin losing 2 weeks in a row. I don't think it hurts him that much. It doesn't hurt him, in my opinion, on the level of Braun Strowman losing to Kalisto, because at least AJ Styles is like a top person on SmackDown, and Corbin is not really feuding with anyone right now. He's just kind of in limbo at this point. So him losing to Styles 2 weeks in a row, won by countout, not nearly as painful for him. And what happened afterward was so it kind of swept his loss under the rug, in my opinion. There were 2 tag matches that happened on Tuesday night in beat the clock fashion. Basically, whichever team won their match faster would become the #1 contenders for the Usos tag titles. First off was American Alpha taking on the Colognes in a rematch from last week. This match this week was much better than last week, in my opinion. In the end, American Alpha wins the match with the Grand Amplitude to Epico, who took a pretty rough-looking bump, in my opinion. Maybe it's just the angle, but it looked kind of a rough bump on his shoulder to me. American Alpha wins that match in 5:17. The other match later in the night is Breezango taking on the Ascension. I'm like, why is it these two taking on each other? Wouldn't it make more sense to switch one of those teams between the two, just to make more of an even kind of playing field? But in a huge shock, Breezango beats the Ascension in a couple of minutes, half the time that American Alpha took to beat the Colognes. And so between this and Jinder Mahal, who I'll talk about in a minute, just SmackDown is kind of refreshing in the sense of these unlikely contenders now fighting for the titles. You got Jinder Mahal fighting for the WWE Championship in a little bit, and then you've got Breezango fighting for the tag titles. It's just a shame that in both these cases, both of the parties here have been just kind of jobbing a lot before they're given this #1 contendership. A short little video with Rusev where he says he refuses to appear on SmackDown until he's given a championship match at Money in the Bank. So that sets up the timetable for when he's expected back from his shoulder surgery that's kept him on the shelf for a while. I think this is kind of an interesting way to bring him back, because it gives him instant credibility by having him come back and being granted a title match, likely for the US title, right away, right out the gate, which is great. I think it builds him up in a big way after having kind of been on the mid-card ether for a while after losing the US title to Roman Reigns last year. So this is, I think, kind of a good way to bring him back when he's healthy again. Randy Orton taking on Eric Rowan in a no DQ non-title match, a rematch from 2 weeks ago. It's really interesting, this whole dynamic of Eric Rowan is like Bray Wyatt's apostle, but they're on separate shows now. I don't know what Rowan is going to do now that he's all by himself with Bray Wyatt on Raw. It's very confusing to me, but be that as it may, I think this was my favorite match of Tuesday night. I think both guys got a good chance to really kind of explore the space. A good combination of just wrestling stuff and also weapon stuff. Orton hitting Rowan with the kendo stick on the apron. He falls back into the table. The match ends on Rowan puts a steel chair in the corner. He whips Orton into it, but he lets go way too early. That's what they teach you not to do in wrestling school, kids. So he runs after Orton, but he goes headfirst into the chair, eats an RKO, and then Orton wins the match. He cuts a promo on Bray Wyatt, but is interrupted by Jinder Mahal, who comes out and cuts his promo. And I wish that with something like this, it was not so an issue of black and white, so to speak. I wish it wasn't so one-dimensional of Jinder, his whole heat being, predicated on the fact that I look different, I have dark skin, that's why you boo me. It's just weird in my opinion. But anyway, the Bollywood Boys come out. They have a bit of a scuffle. Bollywood Boys wearing their 205 Live colors, and so Jinder Mahal, they beat Orton up and they steal the belt, and Orton and Mahal and the Bollywood Boys run off with the championship belt. I know lots have been made of the fact that Mahal has kind of emerged from Jobbersville to become the #1 contender here on SmackDown. But there's a precedent to this. JBL was kind of in mid-card hell for a while before he became the character he is now, and then went on a hell of a tear on SmackDown as the WWE champion. So there's a precedent. I'm not saying Mahal is going to win at Backlash, but there is precedent there to people who kind of come from nowhere on the card to being jumped up and all of a sudden given a push. So it's not that crazy. I get why people are upset about it, but I think people are more upset about the fact that he injured Finn Balor than the fact that he came from being a jobber to being put in this position, honestly. But be that as it may, I think it's going to be good for Mahal, and I think that between him and the Bollywood Boys, they're going to get a ton of heat because, they're Canadian. Main event time as Naomi defends the Women's Championship against extra crispy Charlotte Flair. She's looking extra tan on this night. More of the same this week as we saw last week in their non-title match. Charlotte showing off her strength and Naomi showing off her athleticism. Charlotte kicks out of the rear view, goes for the top rope moonsault, eats some knees from Naomi, but before Naomi can mount a proper comeback, the newly formed heel female contingent of Natalya, Carmella, and Tamina, flanked by James Ellsworth, come out and they run roughshod over both of them. They beat them both up and they stand tall at the end. I think it's a very interesting dynamic you have here. This new coalition with these three women who are, bound together by the fact they feel underappreciated and underutilized, and they're trying to take over. They don't match. They don't have a matching gimmick or anything. They're just pissed off at the world. You got James Ellsworth as kind of a de facto manager. I think it's very intriguing stuff they have here, and they're kind of like they're not prejudiced against any side. They're beating up faces and heels, and Becky Lynch is probably the next to the crosshairs, as kind of alluded to earlier in the show. Even though it was a DQ finish, I'm glad the match ended the way it did, because I wasn't thrilled about the idea of Charlotte holding the belt again anytime soon. To have her lose so soon after her SmackDown debut would take a lot of the luster off of her, and also Naomi needs more time with the championship, in my opinion, and having her lose twice in a row with no comeuppance against Charlotte, I think would have looked very bad for her. So I think the match ending the way it did was probably the best outcome. Time now for me to decide who won for the week, Raw or SmackDown. And folks, I got to give the nod to SmackDown once again this week. Neither show really wowed me this week, but I think I have to give it to SmackDown anyway, just because I think with Raw, they really dropped the ball for their go-home show for Payback. Nothing made me feel invested in, with the exception of the Hardys and Sheamus and Cesaro, and seeing where that goes, nothing made me feel like, oh, I got to see this pay-per-view. I got to see what's going to happen. Again, this show, as I've said before, has been kind of handicapped because two of your high-profile matches, whether your participants, are split across both shows, and that sucks. But still, I don't know what they could have done to make it better, but that's just the way it is, and the build kind of sucked for those two particular matches. Strowman losing the dumpster match to Kalisto was one of the dumbest decisions I don't toss that word around very often, dumb, but it was a bad decision. I don't know why, when you've got this guy who killed Roman Reigns in an ambulance and killed the Big Show by collapsing the ring, to have him lose to the Kalisto in the dumpster match. Granted, it was like a fluke, and he wound up killing Kalisto afterward, but why even have that? Why even have the fluke? Why not just cut that whole part out entirely, have Strowman throw Kalisto in the dumpster, lock it up, and shove it off the stage like he did? That's all you need to do, and it would have accomplished the same thing. I think the finish of that match hurt Strowman more than it will help Kalisto. I think the match itself was great up until the finish, so I'll give him a point for that. I liked the opening segment for Raw, because I have the entertainment value of them switching the sets over and over again between the Hyatt Real and Miz TV. And the Ambrose Asylum, I thought was just a little fun little thing they did there. But yeah, I think it was just a weak go-home show, a lot of quick, nothing matches. Bray Wyatt getting tacked on to the main event for no rhyme or reason, just because, oh, he's in the main event for Payback. We got to do something with him. We got to make him, other than cut another, cookie cutter promo with scary imagery, we got to do something with him. Now, granted, SmackDown had a lot of the same problems this week that I criticized Raw for last week, just too many rematches. You had Orton and Rowan 2 weeks ago, and even though this week's match was my match of the night for SmackDown, we still saw it 2 weeks ago. We saw American Alpha and the Colognes last week. We saw Naomi and Charlotte last week. We saw these again this week. But it wasn't just rematches for the sake of having rematches and for trading wins. There was more to it. There were different layers at it. Like, Orton beats Rowan again, but this time Jinder Mahal comes out and steals the belt. American Alpha and the Colognes fight, and American Alpha wins, but that kind of sets up the thing later in the night when Breezango, of all teams, wins and beats their time and are now the new #1 contenders. And the rematch with Naomi and Charlotte was for the title, and it led to the DQ finish with Natalya and friends coming in and beating down and kicking ass and taking names. So there was a lot of these rematches were jumping off points for new storylines, whereas the rematches we've seen on Raw were things just kind of like turning the wheels as they were moving toward Payback. So I think SmackDown, it was a better paced show. I think it had a strong beginning, a strong middle, and a strong end with their matches. Really, the only thing that was a dud to me was the opening segment with Shinsuke Nakamura and Dolph Ziggler. I think the less you have Shinsuke talking, the better. I think he's just better as kind of a silent, kind of mysterious, enigmatic character who kicks ass. And so far for the last 3 weeks, he's done nothing but kind of stand there, do his little dance, and just talk a lot, which is not good for him, especially compared to along with Ziggler, who is a heel but has no heat. So it's just a very weird matchup there. That was my only real down point with SmackDown this week. I have to give the win to SmackDown because, it had its faults, but it's still, again, like I said last week, they're doing different things, and it makes it more interesting to see where SmackDown is going than what Raw is doing, in my opinion. Let me know what you thought about Raw and SmackDown this week in the comments section below, and don't forget to vote on which show you thought was better in the gimmick in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. A quick update. It has now been a week to the day since I launched my Patreon account at patreon.com/wrestlingwithwregret, and the response so far has been amazing. As of this recording, we now have exactly 100 backers, which is incredible. Thank you all so much for your support. The perks will start rolling out at the beginning of next month. So if you want to get in on that, if you want to get the exclusive Stunt Granny t-shirt along with all the other perks I have listed, go to patreon.com/wrestlingwithwregret for more info. Thank you so much for your support. Be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and buy the t-shirts at prowrestlingtees.com. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.